Hi, historical readers. I'm Joanna Politano. Thanks for joining me for some more of my historical adventures, where I take you backstage into some of my Victorian historical research for my novels. Today we're talking about the famous painter Degas and his beautiful paintings of ballerinas. So Edward Degas was actually one of my favorite people to research in the ballet period because he got the behind-the-scenes look at the ballerinas. So a lot of the audience members would get just the polished version of these dancers out on stage. Edgar Degas went back behind the scenes and he painted them getting ready, doing stretches, sitting kind of crooked or lounging in ways that we wouldn't necessarily think of a ballet dancer sitting. He was able to capture those behind the scenes looks. So most artists in the Victorian would portray these well turned out families in very elegant poses and polished end products, but Degas chose to make candid portraits of these dancers as they truly were, sometimes in less than flattering lights, but there was such a raw beauty and a gritty reality that he portrayed in his paintings. He was one of the few back then who saw the dancers the way they really were, as humans and as young girls, and was fascinated enough to capture their backstage existence. Many of the dancers that he painted were fairly young girls. I'm talking maybe 13, 14 years old, some as young as 9, and they're members of the working class. So this is washerwomen and chimney sweeps and shoe shiners, sometimes pickpockets and laundresses and everything else. They were not genteel girls from moneyed families that were paying their way through dance classes. Most worked these other jobs during the day, and then they came in the evenings to the theater for a little bit of extra money. The lowest in the ranks of ballet were very poor young girls, sometimes as young as 6 years old. They were paid very, very little by the theater, but they trained very hard. The theater also hired something called walkers-on for small parts, and you can that's pretty self-explanatory as to what they are. The few dancers who actually made good money in the theater were the higher-ups, like soloists, principals, the coryphée. Some of these dancers were from the continent, as England in that time had a taste for the exotic on the stage. What makes Degas' paintings so fascinating is that he chose to portray, instead of the flashy and the well-turned-out and the perfectly posed dancer, he showed us that uncommon glimpse of what it was really like for these very worn-out, hard-working girls who usually wore really raggedy practice skirts, secondhand sashes, and he showed their slouched shoulders, their untied sashes, the stretching and the waiting, the girlish chatter, the bad posture. This was a more realistic glimpse into their lives when they were not on the stage. Degas' approach to art really inspired me as I was researching my novel, A Midnight Dance. So when I wrote the book, I tried really hard to give a more accurate view of the way things were for these girls, the very gritty, painful, tragic life and romance for these dancers behind the scenes. But I also really wanted to capture this vivid beauty and energy and life and color that they created for us on stage. That was a really important approach to me because even now, ballet in contemporary ballet gives us this impression of effortless grace. And I feel like we're not doing justice to these artists. So there's this image flying around social media, I don't know if you guys have seen it, where there's a ballet dancer who's standing on endpoint, and we have one shoe on and one shoe off. So we see this gorgeous ballet shoe on one foot, and then we see the blisters and the bloody toes on the other foot. And they're trying to show us that, yes, it's beautiful, and a lot of people want that beauty, but there's so much more that goes into it. Dancers put their bodies through a lot, and they work harder than most of us audience members can ever appreciate. And even in Victorian England, viewers were much more than oblivious. But Degas gives us the benefit of truth, the gritty, painful, often sad truth about these girls who danced in the Victorian ballet. And he showed us exactly how exhausting and full of sacrifice their lives really were. On a more personal note, part of the reason that Degas inspired me so much was that my daughter dances ballet. She's only 8, so this is not professional level ballet. She did a performance in the winter this year, and it was so taxing. She got her bun put in her hair and got ready to go. I think it was about 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and she went all day long doing dress rehearsal and performance and costume breaks and just all the things. And then I think I picked her up about 9 o'clock afterwards, after sitting in the show. She literally just fell to pieces, just so overwhelmed with the day. It was an incredible amount of work for an 8-year-old girl. And back then, these girls were working all-day jobs and living life and taking care of younger siblings and then showing up at the theater to train and to dance in performances. And I find that incredible. And I greatly appreciate Degas for capturing the reality that these girls had to go through to bring the enjoyment to the stage that we see, all the beauty and the grace. Thanks so much for joining me for another look into the past. If you like these videos, please click like or subscribe down below so you can see when I post more historical videos from my research.